Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Hong Kong Horror. I'm your narrator, Simon. Let me start by asking you this. How many of you take public transportation often? Have you ever felt something off while riding the train or the bus? A strange silence, maybe someone staring, or a moment where the air just didn't feel right. In Hong Kong, many people rely on the MTR subway system to get around. Compared to the US, it's insanely efficient, but unlike New York's MTA subway system, it doesn't run 24/7. Most lines open around 6 a.m., and the last trains roll in between 12:30 and 1 a.m., depending on the station. And over the years, there have been a ton, and I mean a ton of paranormal stories surrounding the MTR. It honestly will take multiple episodes just to scratch the surface. Because remember, the system is underground. Tunnels overlap old landfills and forgotten cemeteries, and a lot of stations were built on reclaimed land with pretty dark history behind them. So if you guys enjoy this story, let me know in the comments below, and I can definitely dive into more famous MTR stories in future episodes, if that's what you guys want more of. Tonight though, we're going to focus on one of the more unsettling ones, a story that more than one person has claimed to experience over the years. A story about a train that technically shouldn't exist. According to legends, after the final passenger train finishes for the night, another last train runs through the tunnels, but it's not meant to carry people. It's meant to carry spirits. So turn down the lights, settle in, and let's dive right into this one. This story was shared by a Hong Kong man. Let's call him Kelvin. Back then, he was a young man, and he had just started dating a girl named Sarah. She was his first girlfriend, so he treated the relationship with the kind of seriousness only a first love can bring. Every bit of free time he had outside of work, he spent it with her. And even though they lived pretty far apart, Kelvin tried his best to be the perfect boyfriend. Every night, no matter where they spent the evening, he would escort Sarah home. They would take the MTR together to her station. He would walk her out, make sure she was safely home, and then Kelvin would head back down to the station, get on the train again, and ride all the way to his own stop. They basically lived on opposite ends of the dark blue island line. Sarah lived at the first station, and Kelvin lived on the last. So after dropping her off, Kelvin always had a long ride, from one end of the line to the other. After a while, their routine became second nature. Kelvin didn't mind the long ride home. He would pop in his headphones, close his eyes, and take a little nap as the train carried him across the entire island line. And since they usually didn't stay out too late, he never had any trouble catching the last train. But one night, they lost track of time. After walking Sarah home, Kelvin realized how late it was and sprinted back toward the station, hoping he could still make it. When he reached the entrance, the metal shutters were already halfway lowered. He barely squeezed through the gap. Wow, I'm lucky. 1 minute more and I would have missed it, he said to himself as he rushed down the escalator, heart pounding, praying that the last train hadn't left yet. When he reached the platform, he noticed something strange. He was completely alone. He didn't normally stay out this late, but on a few occasions he had. There was always at least one or two other night owls waiting around. This time, nothing. Not a single soul. Kelvin paced the empty platform for a few moments, trying to shake off the weird feeling crawling up his spine. Then, deep inside the tunnel, a bright white light sliced through the dark. The train was coming. The moment Kelvin saw it, something in him tightened. Aside from the exterior headlights illuminating the platform, the entire inside of the train was nearly pitch black. The carriage lights were on, technically, but so dim they looked like they were dying, flickering, barely glowing. Kelvin had been riding the MTR for years, and he had never seen a train like this. Still, he tried to rationalize it. Maybe the lights are just having issues. Maybe it's some kind of power-saving mode. He kept telling himself this, as the train crept into the station and finally came to a stop. The doors slid open. He stepped inside. Instead of the usual automated announcement, the speakers exploded with a harsh burst of static. Loud, broken, the exact sound old radios make when it loses signal. The kind that gets under your skin and makes every hair on your arm stand up. Kelvin froze for a moment. The air felt different in here. Heavier, stale, old. That's when he noticed something else. This wasn't one of the modern MTR trains he was used to riding every day. The interior looked extremely old, like the early first-generation trains from the 1980s. The kind with yellowish lighting, older metal fittings, and that retro boxy look. Kelvin had only seen them in old photos, never in service anymore though. Kelvin tried to shake off the discomfort and took a seat. The only real light came from the platform outside, leaking weakly into the carriage and casting long, uneven shadows along the floor. Just like the platform, the train was completely empty. No passengers, no late-night stragglers, just him. When the doors closed, he waited for the familiar words, "Please stand clear of the closing doors. Doot 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 doot." But instead, the speaker erupted in static again, loud, broken, and almost angry. There really must be a power issue, Kelvin thought. Lights barely working, PA system fried. Trying not to overthink it, he slipped his headphones in, leaned back, and closed his eyes. He still had a long ride ahead. The gentle swaying of the train as it moved through the tunnel made his head bob back and forth, and before long, his body relaxed. That's when he heard it, a faint, irregular thumping noise. He opened his eyes slowly, expecting maybe something rolling on the floor, a bottle, maybe someone's luggage, whatever. Instead, what he saw made his stomach drop. He was no longer alone. The carriage, which had been empty just moments ago, was now filled with passengers. Kelvin blinked rapidly. He doesn't remember the train stopping. Did he fall asleep? No, he didn't feel the train slow down at all. It hadn't reached the station yet. Yet, somehow, people simply appeared. And something was wrong with them. All the passengers were dressed strangely. Old-fashioned clothes, outdated styles, outfits from several decades ago. And sitting directly across from him was a little boy in pajamas. Not modern pajamas, the old 90s kind, a matching top and bottom with Ultraman printed across the front. And the thumping? It came from him. The boy sat stiffly on the seat, staring at Kelvin without blinking, as he stomped his bare feet against the floor at uneven, unpredictable intervals, harder with each stomp. The man and woman sitting beside him didn't react at all. They stared blankly at the floor, eyes glazed over, deep in their own worlds. Kelvin looked around. Every single person in the carriage had the same sickly pale grayish complexion, the kind of discoloration you wouldn't chalk up to dim lighting. Some sat in seats, some stood, gripping the overhead bars. None of them spoke. None of them moved. It was dead silent. And out of all of them, the only pair of eyes focused on Kelvin were the boys. A cold shiver crawled up Kelvin's spine as he tore his gaze away, trying to act like he wasn't freaked out. But when he looked back, the boy was no longer sitting down. He was standing right in front of Kelvin. Kelvin gasped and jerked back. The kid was only a foot away from him, pale as chalk, wearing those old pajamas and no shoes. In his hand, he held a small styrofoam airplane, the cheap kind that kids used to buy in the 90s, the ones you assemble from a little paper package and throw to watch it glide across the room. The boy raised the plane and held it out to Kelvin. Then, in a soft little voice, he said, "Go-go, play with me." The boy's voice was soft, almost cheerful, but it hit Kelvin like ice water. His heart pounded so hard it felt like it might burst out of his chest. Hands trembling, he took the airplane from the boy. Not wanting to upset him, Kelvin gently aimed it toward the next carriage, the one with fewer of these strange silent passengers. The plane glided a few feet, then skidded to a stop on the floor. A giggle echoed. He whipped his head toward the boy, but the sound didn't feel like it came from the kid's mouth. It felt like it had been projected straight into Kelvin's skull bypassing his ears entirely. Kelvin forced a weak smile, trying to hide the tremors in his voice. The train crawled onward at an unnaturally slow pace. It felt like they were drifting through molasses instead of moving along steel rails. Eventually, the train slid into the station. When the doors opened, the bright platform lights outside flooded the carriage, finally giving Kelvin a clear look at everyone inside. That's when it hit him just how wrong everything was. Every passenger's skin looked pale, almost gray. Their eyes were too dark, too hollow, like bottomless pits, and the little boy's smile, it stretched just a bit too wide, like someone had tugged the corners of his mouth. Kelvin's stomach turned. Should I get off? Should I run? He stood up slowly, inching toward the doors. This felt wrong, horribly wrong. And at that moment, he didn't care about the inconvenience anymore. He would pay for a taxi. He would walk home. He would do anything other than stay on this train. But he hesitated for a second too long. The doors closed. The train lurched forward and slipped back into the darkness of the tunnel. Carriage dimmed into that same gloomy, dying light as before. The boy was still standing there, still holding the little plane. Play with me, play with me. You're not at your stop yet. You still have a while before you get off. Kelvin's breath hitched. How did he know where I'm supposed to get off? The little boy held the airplane out again. Kelvin didn't dare refuse. He took the plane with trembling hands and tossed it deeper into the carriage. Not out of playfulness, but pure, desperate fear. Just get it away from me. Just keep him busy, he thought. At this point, Kelvin knew something was horribly wrong on this train. The next time the boy returned, plane in hand, he tilted his head and softly asked, "Gogo, what's your name?" Kelvin froze. Every Hong Kong elder drilled the same rule into their children. If you ever come across a spirit, never tell them your name. If a spirit knows, it can cling to you, follow you home, slip into your life, even possess you. Kelvin forced a polite smile, swallowing his fear. "Tommy," he lied. "My name is Tommy." The boy giggled. Not a normal giggle, one that sounded too close, too sharp, like it was coming from inside Kelvin's skull again. "It's not Tommy. Your name's Kelvin, right? Next time you come, bring Sarah Tete. Then we can all play together." Kelvin's blood turned to ice. They continued the eerie airplane toss over and over until the train finally slowed and pulled into the next station. The moment the doors opened, Kelvin didn't hesitate. He stood up and rushed toward the exit, trying to make his movements look natural, casual, as if he wasn't seconds away from collapsing. He didn't want to trigger anything, didn't want to upset the boy, didn't want to see what happened if he did. At the door, Kelvin mustered a shaky smile, gave a polite little wave. The boy stood there, motionless, holding his styrofoam plane, dark eyes fixed on Kelvin, watching him leave the carriage. Only when Kelvin stepped onto the platform did he finally breathe again. The door slid shut the moment Kelvin stepped off. He practically power walked toward the escalators, desperate to get above ground, away from the tracks, away from that carriage. But just as the train was about to pull out of the station again, something made him turn back for one last look, and what he saw nearly made him collapse. The inside of the train was now packed, carriages filled end to end with people, except they weren't people. Every face was pale, gray, bloodless, expressionless, until, one by one, they all turned toward Kelvin, every single pair of hollow, dark eyes locked onto him. And then, they smiled. They lifted their hands, and they waved. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. The little boy stood among them, clutching his airplane, smiling that too wide smile as he waved his tiny hand at Kelvin. The train eased forward, drifting into the tunnel, the darkness swallowing every face like a curtain falling over a nightmare. Kelvin stood frozen, trembling so badly his legs barely held him up. He didn't even look back again. he bolted up the escalators and out of the station, and took a taxi the rest of the way home. And after that night, Kelvin never took the MTR late at night again, ever. So, Hong Kong horror fans, you already know the next question I'm about to ask. What do you think happened here to Kelvin? Please pause the video here and drop your theories in the comments below. I really love reading all of your interpretations. Alright, so what do I think happened to Kelvin? First, let me start with this. Kelvin's experience is not unique. Over the years, there have been numerous stories just like this. Enough that it's become one of Hong Kong's most famous transit legends. Old MTR staff, night shift workers, even commuters have all claimed versions of the same thing. After the final passenger train ends for the night, there is a real last train that runs through the tunnels. But it's not for us, it's for them. Locals call it Joy Guai Ce, the ghost-carrying train. The belief is that this final run is meant to move wandering spirits before the entire MTR system shuts down for the night. Souls who died suddenly, lost souls who still don't know they're dead, and people who died near or inside the tunnels and never left. If a person accidentally boards it, they unintentionally step into the ghost's world, even if only for a short ride. Personally, I think this is exactly what happened to Kelvin that night. Kelvin got a glimpse of a world he was never meant to see, and luckily, he got off before the train took him any further. In Cantonese ghost stories, spirits can hide their appearance, mask their presence, and only reveal themselves when a person becomes vulnerable, like when they close their eyes, nod off, or let their guard down. Kelvin didn't see anyone when he first boarded the train, and it wasn't until he shut his eyes to rest, lowering his yang energy, that the world around him shifted. The carriage didn't suddenly fill with people. It was never empty to begin with. Kelvin simply couldn't perceive them yet. And the clothing these spirits wore, some modern, some decades old, some from eras long gone. That's a classic sign in Cantonese folklore, that many different spirits have gathered, all from different times, all inside the same train. Now, Kelvin also mentioned something very interesting. Most of the spirits completely ignored him, acted like he wasn't even there. From a Chinese cultural standpoint, that makes perfect sense. This ghost train isn't haunted in the Hollywood sense. It's considered a functional part of the spirit world, a kind of transportation system for wandering souls. To the ghosts on board, Kelvin wasn't special. He wasn't a target. He was simply just there. Just another presence sharing the carriage. Most random spirits don't care about the living unless the living interacts with them, disturbs their path, or attracts their attention by showing fear or curiosity. Wandering ghosts often behave like they're stuck in a loop, replaying their last memories, following ingrained routines, sitting, standing, moving in cycles. They don't naturally notice the living unless that barrier is broken. And that's why almost none of the spirits reacted to Kelvin. He wasn't part of their loop, except for this little boy. Culturally speaking, even though this boy seemed the most innocent, child ghosts are actually considered more dangerous than most adult ones. Why? Because play is rarely just innocent play in ghost folklore. When a spirit says things like, "Play with me," "Stay with me," "Come with me," it almost always means they want company, sometimes permanently. Child spirits are believed to be extremely lonely. They died young, never completed their life cycle, never learned adult restraint, and their souls are often confused or stuck. They can cling to the living, sometimes literally, because they crave connection, warmth, and attention. They're also considered pure yin, meaning no life experience, no emotional control, raw spiritual energy, and impulsive, boundaryless behavior. From a Cantonese spiritual perspective, this boy wasn't just playing, he was forming a bond, and bonds with spirits are incredibly dangerous. In ghost lore, if a spirit gives you an object and you accept it, you're accepting its energy, you're inviting a connection. When Kelvin took that little styrofoam airplane, acting out of kindness, he unknowingly accepted the boy's invitation. Every time he threw it back, that bond strengthened. If you remember my earlier episodes, practitioners of certain black magic traditions raise child ghosts as scouts, 元拐仔, because they're capable of forming these rapid, deep connections. And look at what happened here. After just a short interaction, the boy suddenly knew Kelvin's real name, which station he was getting off at, and even Sarah's name. This means the boy had already penetrated Kelvin's aura, accessing his thoughts, scanning his memories. That is not harmless. If the boy wanted to, he could have easily followed Kelvin home. Now, we don't know if that was his intent, but it's a massive red flag that he gained so much knowledge so quickly. In Chinese culture, ghosts don't know random humans unless a connection is formed, and once that happens, it can escalate to possession-level attachment if the spirit continues pursuing it. As elders always say, 細鬼唔知驚最麻煩. Little ghosts don't know fear. They're the most troublesome. Now, I don't think the boy had evil intention or hatred, but I do think he was dangerous, because he didn't understand the difference between the living and the dead. To him, Kelvin was simply just another playmate. So what about the scene Kelvin saw at the very end, after he stepped off that train? Why did every spirit suddenly look at him and wave? In Chinese ghost culture, spirits fall into three broad types. Neutral spirits. They're usually wandering, unlikely to interact. Then there's lost spirits, often confused and reactive. And then active spirits, capable of engaging with the living. Most of the passengers on that train were properly neutral. Ghosts who died across different decades, stuck in a routine spiritual migration. The little boy, however, was an active spirit, which is why he was the only one who approached Kelvin first. The others didn't even notice Kelvin existed until the barrier broke. And that barrier broke when Kelvin panicked, stood up, hesitated to get off the train, became scared, accepted the airplane, engaged in the game, and formed a connection with that child spirit. Only after all that did the entire carriage suddenly turn toward him, acknowledging his presence. The boy was the bridge. Once that connection was formed, all of the other spirits could finally see Kelvin clearly. That final wave wasn't a friendly goodbye. It was a sign that, for a moment, Kelvin had crossed into their world, and they were acknowledging him as someone who didn't belong, but almost did. Thank you, Hong Kong horror fans, for making it all the way to this point of the video. I appreciate you staying till the end. Looking forward to speaking with all of you again next week.